I'm Cyrus. Today I will be the host. This is my co-host Beautiful, my president Emmanuel, our secretary Ed, and our special guest Ethan Moore. He is the club advisor, and today we'll be talking about Japanese culture and his experiences. So let's start off. How was your school experience when you went there?
So I would say my school experience while I was in Japan was pretty lax, I would say. As a college student, that would probably be like one of the more relaxed times as a student you'll have in Japan, other than maybe being in elementary school. But I would say that's pretty relaxed. I had like the freedom to go in between my classes. I had plenty of time after and between classes to do what I would like.
Cool. So I remember you saying something that you lived in dorms. How was that?
So the way that my university had it set up, they had it split by 4 by gender. So like the second floor was, the second floor was like, that was like pretty much like our study hall area. And then our third floor was female, male, female, male. And then on the top floor, they had high school students. And those high school students, back in 2011, there was an earthquake, and hurt the Hotoku area, and pretty much a lot of students were displaced, so they allowed them to go to school there.
I understand. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So I have a question about like the lunch thing. Did you have to buy like tickets in like the anime? And like you would give them to the lunch people and they would make it for you, or was it different?
So when I was in college, I actually did not eat in the cafeteria a single time. But it would essentially would have been like how you guys kind of have it, like at least in the university, where
so like how you get like a food card and you would pay that way,
right? Or just with cash, either one's
fine.
But with like when I was working, I primarily worked in like elementary schools. I did have the experience of working in a middle school, but it's pretty much the same system, where students are in charge. They have different duties every week. So some students are responsible for carrying the lunch to their classroom. Some are responsible for distributing it. Some are responsible for taking the money from the other students and holding on to it till the end of the day. And that was kind of how things rolled every day. They don't eat in their lunchroom like you guys typically would. They eat in the classroom. After they eat lunch, they clean the classroom and then the school. And then in elementary, they would of course have the recess, and then in middle school and high school, it's just getting back to work after that.
That's pretty cool. I think Emmanuel has some questions for you too.
So about the school experience.
Mm-hmm.
So when you taught there, was there more like a dress code and like a strict uniform and stuff like that? Because compared to the United States, it's different.
Yeah. So primarily, it's mandatory for them to have a uniform. In elementary, it's pretty much a standard one, I believe, for like all grade levels. I don't think there's a specific one for the schools, but in middle school and high school, there might be a specific uniform that their parents do have to like purchase, so it does get quite expensive, and it's like one of the downsides to having the uniforms there. I will say, one of the schools that I worked at, they were kind of going in a newer model where the uniforms weren't mandatory, so some of the students wore their just street clothes and some of them wore the uniforms. The only time I saw every student wear the uniform was when it was like some sort of ceremony, or like they did a play, they wore the uniforms, which like costumes probably would have made more sense to me, but that's what they did.
Right. So when so like uniforms, obviously they're different than the anime. When you would watch anime, there was always like up to the knee in the anime,
right,
and stuff like that. But like for females, it would be like down to like their ankle,
they're super long
and stuff like that.
They do have like one based off of the season, but for the most part, yeah, they would all still have like the super long like skirts that would go down to their ankles.
So it would be like different uniforms for like spring and summer, or like summer and winter.
Yes, and then they also had like their own workout uniform, like you probably
like gym uniform. Yeah. So, how was your teaching experience there as well?
I definitely don't feel like I did that much. Like lesson plan wise, like I didn't have to do that as much. I pretty much would speak with like my homeroom teachers for the classes that I worked with, and they would like, this is what I kind of want to do. Do you have any sort of input? And that could vary. Like some some schools, like with other like colleagues, like their schools would have them do more. Some of their schools wouldn't like let them do much at all. But with mine, like I did at least have like the freedom where it's just like sometimes it would ask me like, hey, you're the one that speaks English natively. Is there anything you would like to input or and the such like that? And when I was in working with the middle school, the third year teacher actually would have me like grade like the papers for their English contest, like or essays. She would have me do that. And that was another thing. Like there's like in middle school and high school they have like English competitions to where like they'll write an essay on just any topic, and depending on how well they do, they'll go either for like their prefecture or if they'll go to like nationals in Tokyo. And actually, the first year, like one of my students actually did end up going to the nationals. Which really cool.
That's really cool. It's really cool.
What are your experience with some of the students that you teach in Japan?
Oh, so to them, like I was like one of like their favorite person to see a lot. I would say that maybe that is just kind of like putting myself on a pedestal a bit, but like the kids really like enjoy it because I guess they had a lot more fun when they had me come because like they didn't want it wasn't like a typical Japanese lesson like where they're just kind of like having to like listen to a lecture, do work. They actually got to do some sort of activity, so it was nice to see me. And also on top of that, they don't get the experience of see foreigners a bit, so they have tons of questions. When it's like elementary grade students, like the questions are pretty much the same all around. They'll ask the basic ones like, what's your favorite color? What food do you like? What do you like about Japan? Stuff like that. And then like middle school and high school, they'll actually ask a little bit more questions about like my experiences or that.
That's really cool. That's really cool. It's cool that you went to Japan and you did all this. So we have a couple movies that we would like to talk to you about and like the cultural impacts that they had or may have in the future. So there's a movie called Seven Samurai, and Emmanuel really wanted to talk about this, so I'll give it to him.
Oh, that's right. Well, Seven Samurai, when I was watching it, I remember when I like George Lucas and famous American directors, they would base a lot of things based on Seven Samurai. And what do you say in American culture would have been affected just because of that one movie?
So Kurosawa's works are very influential on like Westerns in general. With like that, like what you're mentioning with like George Lucas and like Star Wars, right. Like that is pretty much kind of based off the Seven Samurai. Right. I would say, but mostly like in that kind of like that Western style. Like there's one problem to solve, and then like there's a band of people that are going to like come in and take care of it. It was probably more influential on that part. Like at the time, like I initially didn't know this, but like in Japan it was viewed to be more Western than it was actually to be like Japanese. So I could kind of understand why from that perspective that it wasn't typically what you would see from an era piece. It was like a lot of like things like I read a description where it was described like cowboys and Indians, like especially with like having like the bandits come in like on horseback and just kind of like attack them.
So it was Westernized for Japanese people, but it was Japanese for Western people, and
yes.
which is kind of complicated, but it's cool at the same time. And the cool thing is we're still taking inspiration from said movies. Even if it's from Star Wars, we still have that inspiration coming from Seven Samurai, which I think is amazing.
Right, like if you notice, like if you know your culture on Japanese stuff and stuff like that, like you'll notice like very close similarities. Like one of the princesses in the movie had like a princess outfit, like a Japanese princess outfit, and it's just very interesting in that way to see like just design and all that. But with the Seven Samurai, like there was I can see why they would say, oh, that's Western, because it wasn't only like just the story, but it was also like the way they would film and stuff like that from what I've seen.
Right.
And there There was the main, not the main character, but the one who was pretending to be a samurai. I can't remember his name, but like I can see how that would be a lot different, because you wouldn't see something like that probably
Right.
back in that day. But you probably would like see like a thief or something pretend to be a samurai.
Right. So I don't remember his name, but I remember the actor's name, so Mifune. So a big part of like another reason why it wouldn't have been seen like as like Japanese at that time is like because it was like a period piece of like 1600s Japan, and a lot of like the hierarchy wasn't very present there. So of course like the Seven Samurai are group of Ronin, which are like masterless samurai, which isn't like normal. I wouldn't say it was like normal. There would still be.
It was like rare. It was a rarity, but there was still some out there.
Right. But like the bigger things would be like also like their interactions with just the villagers in general. Like there is like the one who's like in love with like one of the villager's daughter, like a farmer who like shaved his daughter's head to make her look more masculine. Like stuff like that. They have were like having like a love affair, whereas like it kind of shows like the time difference. Like this is post World War II. And like kind of like the hierarchy was kind of like coming out of fashion during the early 1900s anyway, but it would have just been like one of those things where, like they wouldn't have even been seen or even bothered talking to each other. Like it's like he's too high class to want somebody that's just like a poor farmer. Right.
So as we were talking about that, let's go some hot tea real quick. Like the princess, the emperor's daughter, how she decided to marry a commoner, right? And so she's no longer going to become the empress, which I think is like, why? But because I'm not a noble or anything like that, it's not as common to me.
And sometimes in the fairy tales, usually if a princess or king marries a commoner, they become royalty as well.
See,
difference.
that's the fantasy part.
Mhm.
But in the culture right now, and the culture in the past, the emperor, the current person leading the nation, all he is basically a title right now, but you still gotta show respect. He decides his successor. So he now has to find a new successor because he discontinued his lineage by himself because his daughter decided to marry a commoner. And the last names are very important in that culture. It
Right.
shows their status. Like
Right.
back in the past, it would be used as like first names because a lot of people didn't have last names.
Right.
Except for like samurai and stuff like that, and people with a higher status. Also, a fun fact: the hilt on the sword also showed like showed your class. Like if it was gold and had a lot of design on it, it showed that you were a higher class, you were more noble. But if it was relatively plain, it means you're on the lower totem pole
Right.
of the hierarchy.
With what you were saying about the last names, like and lineage and all that, like you can tell that the last names, like what was your lineage based on your last name.
Yeah.
So like if your last name is based on like nature, it'll be like you were a commoner of some sort, or this is what your family's job was at the time, right? And because samurais had a different type of last name. It wasn't like fish, like or whatever the meaning would be, or, or the moon, or
like
trees,
the store
forests.
clerks.
Right.
Their store would tend to be like their last name or something
Right.
like that, along those lines.
Yeah, like I know this one guy. His I think Jitsukawa was his last name, and I think it was like a fishing company, and like that's how he knew what his lineage was, and like he learned like not only was it like fish, but it was also warrior, and it's very different than American Western culture where your last name is just your last name. It may have a meaning in like a different language, but in general, it doesn't really have a meaning in that type of way.
That's the difference between now and then, because now like everyone has a last name, and I guess you could still figure out your lineage from said last name, but last names don't mean as much anymore. They're like just a name now, when compared to back then, if you had those names, people would have to respect you a different way. Kind of like the emperor and the queen. Like, they still have their powers and so on and so forth, but like they're nowhere near as powerful now. Like they're just a title piece.
Yeah, it's like dimmed down. They're more like the representators of the country, and like if the president didn't have power, that's them. They just talk for the country.
Exactly.
Like whoever
They're just-
the government controls
Like-
it, and then they just speak it out.
Like if you go on a chessboard, there's the kings. The kings are like the weakest piece on the board, right? And the queen would be the strongest.
The queen representing like the government and all that.
Yeah. So let's talk about the movie Katakuris.
Oh, Happiness of the
Happiness of the
Katakuris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a very interesting movie. I could say, for those of you who don't know, it's a movie about a family who open up like a bed and breakfast, right? And strange things keep happening to the guests, and it makes them look bad. But it's also a musical. And when I first saw like a trailer of it, the way they were dancing and the way they were like being all dramatized and all that, it seemed more like a Power Rangers movie.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like the way they were just doing action poses and all that, and it was a very interesting movie. Like, what would you say? How true or like how much culture of like common culture would be in them?
So where would you watch this movie?
So this
What
was
suggestions?
this was what early in the semester. So when we first started the club, this was like one of the first live action films we watched.
Yeah,
After the Seventh Samurai.
Yeah, I was there. I was watching it halfway in the movie because I already started it.
Yeah.
You have to start closing.
Oh wow, we spoke a lot. Okay.
So, which, as you're saying, there's not very much culture in that movie.
Not a ton. No, I wouldn't say that. Like, what you could probably see would probably be like the family dynamic at the beginning where they're eating dinner together. Like I wouldn't say it's uncommon for teenage older kids to still live with their parents after like they graduated high school. Like most would stay in their parents' home until like they're 26. It's pretty normal. But like those situations were atypical, where it's just like the mother was just kind of like the daughter was kind of like lovesick, where she was always kind of like falling in and out of love with people, and then like the son was a criminal, so it was just kind of like
He's kind of afraid of stuff and stuff like that.
So that was a little atypical. Granted, stuff like that still occurs, but yeah.
Right.
Well, today we won't be able to talk about the current animes that we've recently watched. So I hope you have a wonderful day. Like and subscribe, and stay tuned next Wednesday, and we'll keep you posted on new historical events.
Okay. All right. And also, on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, not today, but we will have the world's finest chocolates. We'll be selling them in the bus
loading zone.
Bus loading zone.
Have a wonderful day.
It's only $1.
All right.
Literally? I
You didn't.
was